Since inception, I really wanted to focus on American manufacturers. So about 95% of our supplier pool is domestic, or so we thought. We're discovering that's not exactly true, meaning many of our suppliers, the key components or elements of their products that we need are imported mostly from Asia.
You got to see what's happening. They all want to come back to Michigan and build cars again. You know why? Because of our tax and tariff policy.
President Trump is pretty pleased with his sweeping tariffs.
We're rich as hell. We're the hottest country in the world, and I like that.
In fact, they'll make Americans poorer, and the president has started something he cannot win.
Once celebrated as monuments of American industrial might, vast plants in Detroit and Ohio now stand silent. Locked gates, broken windows, and empty parking lots mark spaces where thousands of cars once rolled out every day. Communities that live by the rhythm of the auto industry are now watching their lifeblood evaporate. Companies once considered unshakable, Tesla, Ford, Cadillac, Nissan, are quietly retreating. The assembly lines that once blazed with light 24 hours a day have become cold metal skeletons, relics of a vanished era. For towns that depended entirely on the car industry, the sudden halt has not only stripped away jobs, but has also created what locals describe as economic dead zones, where hope is as scarce as paychecks. In the heart of the Midwest, unemployment has nearly doubled in just 9 months, a statistic that feels less like a number and more like a sky etched into the landscape that if the empty plants of Detroit and Ohio symbolize the collapse of an era, then Tesla's retreat stands as a clearest signal that even America's brightest star cannot withstand the mounting pressures. Once hailed as a crown jewel of U.S. innovation, Tesla found itself cornered by a tariff storm it could no longer absorb. In a single quarter, new duties added an estimated $300 million to operating costs, enough to shake even a giant. The markets reacted instantly and brutally. Within days of President Trump's tariff announcement, Tesla's stock tumbled by 20%, wiping billions in market value and fueling panic among investors who had long considered the brand untouchable. The company made a quiet but telling shift, moving its flagship 4680 battery program across the border to Quebec, lured by a $1.2 billion package of incentives that Washington could not match. That decision revealed a sobering truth. The economic environment abroad had become more attractive than at home. The final blow came from domestic policy changes. When emissions penalties were rolled back, Tesla lost nearly $2.8 billion in carbon credit revenue, a stream that had once kept its balance sheet afloat. Without that cushion, the company's American operations no longer looked sustainable. What was once the icon of electric ambition became just the latest in a growing line of corporate departures. But Tesla is not alone in its struggles. The weight of tariffs has fallen just as heavily on Cadillac, transforming what was once a symbol of American prestige into a burden threatening its very survival. A 25% duty has pushed the price of every Cadillac model higher, adding anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 per vehicle, an increase that even the most loyal customers find hard to justify. The Escalade, Cadillac's flagship SUV and a long-standing status icon, now carries a price tag of $93,295, placing it far beyond the reach of families who once saw it as aspirational. The crisis is not confined to the showroom floor. In Tennessee, General Motors has already announced it will halt production of its EV models, the La and the Vistique, by the end of 2025. This decision effectively stalls the company's electric ambitions in the United States. Local leaders have not stayed silent. In Arlington, Texas, home to one of Cadillac's most important plants, the mayor issued a blunt warning, calling the tariff regime nothing less than a job-killing policy. For workers already bracing for layoffs, such words feel less like political rhetoric and more like confirmation of a grim future they had long feared that Cadillac's troubles might seem severe, but they pale compared to the bleeding endured by the industry's largest players. Ford, the very name once synonymous with American resilience, has been forced into retreat. Losses of more than $1.5 billion have triggered plant closures in both Chicago and Michigan, leaving nearly 9,000 workers without jobs in just a matter of months. Entire neighborhoods that once thrived on the rhythm of factory shifts now face shuttered gates in a silence that feels permanent, a haunting echo of prosperity turned to despair across the Atlantic. Stellantis, the parent company of Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge, has suffered an equally brutal blow. Nearly 900 U.S. workers have already been laid off, with multiple assembly lines frozen indefinitely. The company reported losses of $2.3 billion, while the direct impact of tariffs alone has been estimated at more than $330 million. What began as a policy designed to protect domestic jobs has instead accelerated their disappearance, eroding the very foundation of America's industrial belt. For both Ford and Stellantis, the question is no longer about weathering a temporary storm, but whether producing in the United States remains viable at all. If Ford and Stellantis are bleeding inside America, then Chevrolet and Nissan are bleeding America itself. Legendary models once proudly stamped with Made in USA, from the Silver Dew pickup to the Blazer SUV, are now being assembled in plants across Mexico and South Korea. For consumers, the badge may look the same, but for workers in Michigan, Texas, and Missouri, the reality is unmistakable. The assembly lines have gone dark. In the second quarter of 2025 alone, General Motors recorded losses of $1.1 billion, a figure that reflects both collapsing demand and the immense cost of abandoning its U.S. footprint. The logic driving the company's decisions is cold and simple. By shifting production south and overseas, GM slashes labor costs by as much as 70%. No tariff wall in Washington could erase that advantage. Nissan has made similar calculations. Once eager to expand its Tennessee operations, the company has reversed course, cutting 20% of its American capacity and leaving more than 25,000 workers without jobs. For the small industrial towns that depended on those factories, the effect has been devastating. Shops close their doors, schools lose vital funding, and entire communities hollow out, becoming shells of their former selves. Each departure reinforces the same brutal message. Global production is not waiting for America to solve its crisis. The very policies designed to shield U.S. workers from competition have instead accelerated the unraveling of a proud industrial tradition. From Detroit to Ohio, from Tennessee to Michigan, the silence of shuttered plants speaks louder than any statistic. Factories that once embodied the might of American industry now stand as monuments to decline, leaving behind communities scarred by unemployment, uncertainty, and the slow erosion of hope. The auto industry, once the engine of American prosperity, now teeters on the edge of irreversible decline. And as more companies choose to leave rather than endure, the question is not just whether jobs will return, but whether America's industrial heartbeat can ever be revived. As if the collapse of American icons were not enough, foreign automakers caught in the same storm are now facing their own reckoning. Hyundai, long considered a quiet success story in the southern United States, has become the victim of a double squeeze: tariffs that drive up costs on the front end and immigration crackdowns that choke the very workforce needed to keep production alive. In the second quarter of 2025, Hyundai's profits tumbled by more than 20%, with analysts warning that sticker prices on popular models could climb by another $3,000 to $6,000. Once marketed as the affordable alternative to pricey U.S. brands, the company now risks losing a competitive edge in the very market where it gained the most ground. But numbers tell only part of the story. At Hyundai's battery plant in Georgia, federal agents carried out one of the largest immigration raids in recent memory, detaining 475 workers in a single sweep. Overnight, an already fragile supply chain lost its lifeline, throwing production schedules into chaos and exposing just how dependent modern manufacturing has become on migrant labor. Managers scrambled to fill shifts, while local suppliers suddenly found themselves without orders they had once considered guaranteed. Faced with spiraling costs and a shrinking labor pool, Hyundai began pivoting its supply chain strategy away from the United States entirely, redirecting investment toward Vietnam and India. That shift does more than reduce American jobs. It signals to other foreign automakers that the U.S. may no longer be a reliable base of operations. For Washington, it stands as another warning that policies meant to shield American industry are instead accelerating its flight abroad. While competitors overseas quietly seize the opportunities left behind, Hyundai's retreat is not just another corporate headline. It is a glimpse into the broader wreckage. Every departure, every shuttered line adds weight to a national bill that is becoming impossible to ignore. For American families, the damage shows up first in the showroom. New vehicles now carry an extra $3,000 on average, while pickup trucks, along the backbone of rural and working class life, have surged by as much as $10,000. What was once a household purchase has turned into a luxury many simply cannot afford. Families are holding on to older vehicles longer, despite mounting repair costs and declining reliability. The ripple effects are everywhere. Auto loans are climbing to record highs, stretching family budgets to the breaking point. Insurance premiums tied to the rising cost of cars have followed the same trajectory, adding hundreds of dollars per year to household expenses. For younger Americans entering the workforce, owning a car, the basic ticket to economic mobility in much of the country, is slipping out of reach. The national picture looks even more alarming. Analysts warn that the U.S. economy could shed between $45 and $75 billion in output, with inflation creeping higher by another 1.3%. Auto sales, once a steady engine of growth, have plunged by nearly 1 million units, falling to an annual volume of just 15 million. That decline reverberates far beyond dealerships. State governments lose billions in tax revenue. Suppliers edge closer to bankruptcy. Local economies that depended on factory payrolls watch their main sources of income vanish. The industry that once made Detroit a global symbol of modernity now risks being remembered as a cautionary tale. Instead of fueling prosperity, the auto sector is draining confidence, hollowing out the middle class, and exposing the fragility of policies that promise protection but deliver decline. While the United States bleeds jobs and capital, Canada has turned crisis into opportunity. Quebec has rapidly positioned itself as a new hub for electric vehicle batteries, anchored by Tesla's decision to shift its 4,680 program northward under a $1.2 billion incentive package. Far from being a consolation prize, this investment is becoming the cornerstone of a new industrial ecosystem. Investors have noticed. Japan and Europe, wary of Washington's volatility, are channeling capital into Canada, betting on political stability and long-term security.